There's a feeling moving between you and a woman right now that you were never taught to recognize. And it's already deciding how this ends. You may not see it happening. Most men don't. It moves quietly, underneath the conversation, underneath the laughter, underneath every small moment you think is just small talk. And the reason you miss it isn't because you're not paying attention. It's because nobody ever told you what to look for. You were taught to read words, not feelings. You were taught to listen for what she says, not for what she's experiencing while she says it. So you keep replaying conversations, wondering what worked and what didn't, never quite landing on the answer. There is one question sitting underneath almost every relationship that ever mattered to you. What is the one feeling, not a compliment, not a gift, not even attraction itself, that decides whether a woman thinks about you for weeks or forgets you by tomorrow? By the end of this video, you will know exactly what that feeling is. You'll know how to recognize it, how to create it, and how most men destroy it without ever realizing they did. Ask any woman what made her fall for someone, and she'll struggle to explain it. She'll mention small things, the way he laughed, a comment he made once, a night that felt different somehow. But none of that is the actual answer. That's not because the truth is complicated. It's because she's never had to put words to it. Nobody asks her to. The feeling lives underneath language, in a part of her experience she reacts to long before she analyzes it. Here's what makes this interesting. Researchers who study attraction have found that emotional response almost always precedes conscious reasoning, meaning she feels something is right or wrong about a connection before she can explain why. That gap between feeling and explanation is exactly where most men get lost, because they're trying to win her over with logic, with effort, with charm, when none of that is what's actually being evaluated. You've probably done everything you were told works. You've been attentive. You've been generous with your time. You've said the right things at the right moments. And still, somewhere along the way, her interest faded. Quietly, without a clear reason, in a way that left you replaying the whole thing trying to find your mistake. There wasn't one mistake. There was a missing ingredient. Think back to a conversation that once seemed completely ordinary. One where you walked away feeling good about how things went, and yet something shifted afterward that you couldn't quite name. That shift is the feeling we're talking about. And once you understand it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. In how she responds to you, in how long she stays in a conversation, in whether she brings you up to her friends days later. Of course, every connection has its own context. Not every fading interest comes down to this one thing. But when you understand what's actually happening underneath the surface, patterns that once looked random start making complete sense. He texted her good morning every day. He complimented her constantly, her looks, her intelligence, her sense of humor. He made himself available whenever she needed someone to talk to. And he still watched her interest fade, slowly, the way air leaks out of a tire you didn't even notice was losing pressure. He did everything he was told was right. That was the problem. Now, you might be thinking, couldn't she just have lost interest for unrelated reasons? Sometimes, yes. People get busy. Life gets complicated. But here's the detail that separates a normal lull from this specific pattern. When a woman pulls away because of unrelated circumstances, she usually still seeks reassurance from the man. When she pulls away because the feeling we're describing is missing, she stops needing him to fill that space at all. This is what behavioral psychologists call habituation, the brain's tendency to stop responding emotionally to something once it becomes fully predictable. It's not personal, it's biological. A man who is always available, always validating, always saying yes, becomes emotionally predictable. And predictability, no matter how kind it feels, eventually goes quiet in the nervous system. She isn't measuring effort. She's measuring something else entirely. If it's not attention, and it's not effort, then whatever creates this feeling has to be something she experiences internally. Not something performed for her, but something she feels in his presence. To understand that, we need to look at the actual psychology behind what makes someone feel safe enough and alive enough to stay emotionally engaged. Emotional safety isn't softness, and it isn't agreeing with everything she says. It's something quieter than that and far more specific. Psychologists describe emotional safety as the felt sense that you can be fully honest without fear of being judged, dismissed, or punished for it. In a relationship, that means she can express an opinion, admit a fear, or even disagree with him, and nothing falls apart. He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't withdraw. He doesn't punish her with silence or sarcasm. Picture a woman mentioning, almost casually, that she had a rough day and snapped at a coworker. A man without emotional steadiness might minimize it, joke about it wrong, or quietly judge her for it. A man with emotional safety simply receives it, calm, unbothered, present. She notices that. Not consciously, maybe, but her nervous system logs it as data. This person can hold what I bring to him. Of course, emotional safety doesn't mean he agrees with everything or has no boundaries of his own. In fact, real safety usually includes a man who can disagree with her gently, without making her feel threatened for having a different view. That distinction matters more than people realize. One calm reaction means little on its own. But repeated calm reactions, across different emotional situations, start to build something durable in her mind. A sense that being herself around him doesn't cost her anything. Here's where most men get this wrong, though. They assume emotional safety alone is the whole answer. They become endlessly agreeable, endlessly stable, endlessly available, and end up exactly where the texting example left off. Stable men sometimes still get placed in the friend category, and it isn't because something is wrong with them. It's because safety, on its own, was never designed to carry the entire weight of attraction. Here's the part almost nobody explains correctly. Safety keeps her comfortable. But comfort alone, left on its own, eventually goes quiet. Something else has to keep her attention alive. Something that exists alongside safety, not instead of it. That missing piece is what we can call controlled unpredictability. Not games, not mixed signals, not disappearing to seem interesting. It's something far more subtle than that. Controlled unpredictability describes a man who remains slightly self-directed, someone who has his own rhythm, his own standards, his own life that doesn't bend entirely around her presence. He might take a few hours to respond to a message, not out of strategy, but because he was genuinely absorbed in something of his own. He might disagree with her plan for the weekend, gently, because he actually has a preference. He isn't fully predictable, and that small unpredictability keeps a part of her attention engaged in a way certainty never does. This is what researchers studying motivation call variable reward response. The brain pays closer, more sustained attention to outcomes that aren't entirely guaranteed. It's the same mechanism behind why a conversation that ends slightly too early stays in your mind longer than one that drags on. Her brain doesn't fully relax around him, in the good sense. There's just enough open space left to keep wondering. Of course, this only works layered on top of safety. Unpredictability without safety reads as instability, and instability creates anxiety, not attraction. But safety paired with a man who isn't entirely predictable, entirely available, or entirely explainable, that combination is what creates the specific pull women often describe as not being able to stop thinking about someone. We've now named the full feeling. Safety plus controlled unpredictability, together, consistently. Remember what I told you at the start, that there was one feeling most men miss entirely, the thing deciding whether she thinks about you for weeks or forgets you by tomorrow. We're standing right next to it now. But knowing the ingredients isn't the same as keeping them alive over time. Obsession isn't built in one big moment. It's built in a pattern she doesn't even realize she's tracking. When safety and unpredictability repeat across small interactions, something interesting starts happening in her mind. She begins, without fully noticing, predicting what being around him feels like. Calm, but never quite fully certain. That blend creates what attachment researchers call a secure but active bond. Secure enough that she relaxes into it, active enough that she keeps reaching toward it. Take something as simple as a delayed text response. A man who replies an hour later because he was genuinely living his life, without anxiety about the delay, sends an entirely different signal than a man who disappears out of strategy or insecurity. She can feel the difference, even if she couldn't explain how. That difference is the difference between confidence and coldness. This pattern compounds. Each time she experiences safety without losing the slight pull of his independence, the bond strengthens a little more. This is the mechanism. This is what builds into something she starts actively seeking out, rather than passively receiving. But there's one thing that can break this pattern instantly, even after weeks of doing everything right, and it doesn't look like a mistake at all. It usually happens right after things start going well, which is exactly why he never sees it coming. A man feels secure in her interest. She's expressed that she likes him, maybe even said it directly. And in that moment of relief, he relaxes in the wrong direction. He becomes fully available, fully explainable, fully predictable. He drops the independence that was quietly part of the attraction, assuming it's no longer necessary now that she's in. This is the moment most men walk away from without realizing it. The safety remains, but the unpredictability disappears. And without that second half of the feeling, the connection slowly settles into something comfortable. And comfortable, left alone for too long, eventually feels like nothing at all. You don't need to overanalyze every text or every silence to apply this. The principle is simple, even when the psychology underneath it is layered. Give her a place that feels safe, and give her a man who still belongs, in some small way, to himself. That combination, sustained, is the feeling that decides everything. You now understand what most men never get told directly. That obsession isn't built through effort or charm, but through a specific emotional balance between safety and independence. You don't need to perform constantly or analyze every interaction to get this right. You simply need to remember the balance and protect it, especially right after things start going well. If this gave you a moment of recognition, I'd love to hear it. Think back to a moment things cooled off with someone you cared about. Was it right after she started showing real interest? Tell me when it happened in the comments below. I read every one of them, and your experiences shape what we cover next. If you want to keep learning how this plays out in real situations, subscribe. Because understanding the small, overlooked moments like this one is exactly what we do here, every week. In the next video, I'll show you the exact early moment most men give off the opposite of this feeling, before she even consciously registers it, so you can catch it before it costs you anything.